Hey guys, Nicole here. All right, let's take a look at our full moon that we have on December 22nd. So this full moon is going to be at 0 degrees of Cancer, and the sun will be at, of course, 0 degrees of Capricorn. Astronomically, a full moon is when the Earth is in the middle, and you've got the sun on one side, and the moon has moved to a position in its monthly, orbit where it's exactly opposite the sun. Okay, so the degrees will always be exact. 0 of Cancer and 0 of Capricorn. Now, when you think about what the symbolism of a full moon, what it looks like, and you can apply this to any of the eclipses. Anytime you have one planet opposing another planet, they're forming a relationship. If you understand the lunar cycle, the same exact cycles can be looked at, by replacing the planets. All right. So when you have an opposition, that quicker planet, in this case the moon, has moved into position where it is, in a sense, it's overshadowing that more perhaps quote-unquote powerful planet, that's sort of stronger planet. The slower a planet is, the more it has the ability to, because it has to do with spaces and stretches of time. And the slower a planet is, that means it stays, it's things in our existence that unfold very slowly over time, okay? So when you have a little quick body, a little quick planet, like the moon, which is our little satellite, in position with an exact opposition, it's like the sun is being overshadowed for a moment. Just like when a cloud passes, over the sun, it's like that in a sense. And if you think about the moon represents our unconscious, the unconscious parts of ourselves. It is the human experience. So it ties to our emotions. It ties to how we process memory through emotions. So the stuff that's inside of all of us ties into those periods of time in our life when we were completely dependent, i.e. a baby or a toddler, when we were little, and when we didn't have control of our environment, when we were smaller than everybody else and everything else, where we needed, there's this quality of feeling like, feeling afraid and feeling the emotions that have to do with fear that can sometimes tie into the moon. And they can be irrational fears because we can have things that are tied into our psychology that have to do with our childhood, that were experiences that when we didn't have the ability to process and to understand consciously, with our minds through wisdom and experience to know what was kind of going on. And what happens is these memories that we have that are sort of stored initially as emotion, the adult mind wants to understand this childhood. Maybe we have a memory of something kind of traumatic or very traumatic, and we want to understand it. We want to make it make sense. So we'll sort of rewrite the story. It's kind of like, I know it's almost like a computer. It's like rewriting or re-indexing or something, what happened. Memory is quite fascinating to study. So the moon's very much tied to memory, very much tied to what has happened in the past. And because it's always about emotional reactions to things, it's projecting into the future our belief, our perception about what's going to happen. So some people are comfortable doing that, and some people are comfortable in the world around them, and some people are afraid. Now, moon being in Cancer, Cancer is the sign that the moon rules. So this is a very, shall we say, lunar. It's a very pure, quote-unquote, moon. At the same time, I want to share with you something that I do. I use the tropical chart, which is what we're talking about now, as well as the draconic chart, which is a hypothetical chart. The draconic to me has to do with looking at the shadow side that's happening right now underneath everything else. So during this current moment in time, we've got, for example, Pluto is in Capricorn. We've had Mars and Saturn in Capricorn. Jupiter has been hanging out this last little bit. I've had it in Scorpio. So we've had these big collective movements that have had to do with gender and that have had to do with hidden secrets and power plays. That's Scorpio stuff, Capricorn, the Pluto and Capricorn. What I'm seeing right now with overall, I feel like this is going to be, don't look a gift horse in the mouth this sort of month. And the next 3 months, so January, February, March, and into April. April gets even more sort of intriguing. But the story, what is the story that you've been telling yourself? and what is the story that other people have been telling themselves. And it's like we've got two different stories, and we're like totally comfortable in these lands of denial in a sense. Like we know our stories maybe aren't the same story, but it's working right now. Okay, I feel like with the 0 degree, which is the cardinal point, the 0 degree of Cancer and Capricorn, it tells us that this is the beginning. It's a new start, and it's a new beginning on a soul level that has to do with, I think this year is going to be huge for karmic relationships coming together that are like, okay, we have a lot of work to do in a short period of time. So I think there's going to be this next year people jumping into marriages, like getting married all of a sudden, as well as people who are just like, okay, we're done, and splitting up really, unexpectedly. I think we're going to see a lot of celebrity sort of craziness in the relationship realm. And that's for a different video. But these themes of Cancer and Capricorn, the mother and the father, the inner world, inner security, emotional security, how do I feel versus outer security? How does the world, how secure do I feel in the world outside of my home life, my private life, right? So you've got your private, personal, inner world, and you've got your reputation, your outer the parts of you that are seen outside, right? With this opposition, and it's forming a square as well to Chiron, which is in Pisces, so it's an out of sign square, but it's at 27 of Pisces, and this Chiron is one that has to do with wounding that we have, that's kind of like deeper spiritual wounding, existential wounding, meaning. So depending on your generation, the Chiron's going to sort of mean different things for different people in different generations, but I feel like overall we're looking at, for example, in America, what's the American dream? What is the collective dream, the sort of collective hallucination that we share with each other that has to do with life? What is an American person's life supposed to look like? For men, for women, what have you? And there's a wound there. Now, Chiron is in Pisces for everybody in the entire world. That's where Chiron's at right now. So there's also these big themes that have had to do with religion and spirituality, meaning as far as science versus religion, beliefs. And I feel like Neptune definitely has to do with being in a dream space. And in America, at least, we've certainly have had a very confusing, I suppose, or surprising past few years politically. We have a president who is was a former reality star, basically, and that's very Neptunian. It's illusion. It's creating a fantasy. So, not to get off topic, but the point is, with this square here that we have to Chiron, themes on a personal level that have to do with, especially for people who have strong cardinal planetary placements. So it's going to be your Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn people, or anybody who's got early degrees. So if you've got in your chart, pull your chart up and see if you've got anything at the very end of any sign. I don't care. So anything that's like, I would say 27 degrees through 27, 28, 29, 0, 1, 2, 3, around there, that window. Circle those planets. Like print out your chart, circle those planets, and see what is the relationship of this moon to those planets. So I'll give you an example. I personally have a 27 degree Leo rising. So this is going to be forming a little relationship that has a kind of a Taurus-y relationship. I feel like personally this upcoming full moon is going to be one that's really has a lot to do with denial and trying to make something that's not realistic a reality. Knowing that it's a dream, or knowing that it is too good to be true, but still pushing forward anyway because we don't want to deal with the deeper material that's harder to face. So this is in relationships, this is in businesses. If you own a business, and again, I'm being very talking about the general overall feel that we're all experiencing. So this is not granular, but a sense of feeling a little bit perhaps confused, or feeling like you're on the right track, almost like blindly believing that you're on the right track. So just this next year, I would say, if you've got to make changes that have to do with your family, whether it's like a breakup or a divorce, or changes that have to do with moving, or that have to do with your business, selling your business. Maybe you're sick of running your business or something, and you are, instead of just deciding to sell it, maybe you do some things to sabotage the business, or I've just seen that with a few clients. And so I would say this next year, there's going to be a lot of big changes. So what have you been personally not facing in your world that has to do with your story? And a really good month to take inventory is in January, not just because it's January, but just there's also, as far as the transiting planets, it'll be a good time to kind of sit down and reevaluate this last year, and maybe even reevaluate the last 5 years, and for yourself figure out where do you want to be next, in 2020. So anyway, point being, let's come back here to our sun and our moon. Moon in Cancer has a full moon. This is going to be a time where it's going to be the least rational. Cancer is tied into those times before we had language, when we were an infant, or we were in utero, when we were completely dependent. We were little and soft, and if somebody dropped us, we had a little soft spot in our head. I mean, we were completely vulnerable to the world around us, to our environment. So we needed to be protected. And that's the job and the role of the guardian, or the parent, the mother usually, but not always, the parent. So what did that look like for you? If you had a happy, cozy childhood, if your mom was really comfortable in that role of being a mother to you, then probably this full moon will be something you can handle, I suppose, especially if this full moon doesn't form any tough aspects to your chart. If you've got early degrees, though, expect those aspects of your psyche to be affected emotionally. So when I was saying my ascendant forms a little kind of what I'd consider a Taurian relationship, to me this is a bit like, it's actually, I'm sorry, I said the wrong thing, it's not Taurian, it's Piscean. So it's a semi-square, which is a 30 degree, it's an approaching. Moon in this realm, for me it'll be like in the 11th house of my chart, but then it'll move into my 12th, so it kind of feels a little bit detached. I feel like maybe with my kids, they'll be my kids are all getting older now at their dads, and they'll be just kind of all over the place. I think I'm going to feel a little bit lonely, probably, maybe, perhaps on Christmas. It happens a lot for me anyway. But so just look at your chart and see what gets hit. I also, at the same time, though, my moon forms a nice little sextile to it'll form a sextile to my Venus. It'll form a square to my moon. It squares my sun, moon in opposition, and it's conjunct, so it'll be conjunct my Jupiter. So it's kind of like knowing that this is what my life is, and my kids are getting older, and supporting them and what it is that they've got to go do, and the holidays are for them, a little bit of self-sacrifice. Okay, so that being said, let's look as well at the Draconic chart. In the Draconic, we have that moon in Pisces, and it's like at 3 or 4 of Pisces. Let me see, I had it up here. Yeah, three, it's like three Pisces and like 56 or so, 57, something like that, minutes. So 3, 4. Early Pisces. So anytime a planet is at the first 10 degrees of a sign, it's going to really manifest as that sign, right? Pretty pure. Moon in Pisces is quite dreamy. It's emotionally very sensitive. It is, wouldn't be surprised if those of you who are affected, if you're an insomniac during full moons, you probably will have some pretty wild dreams that wake you up at night, even during this full moon. That's pretty normal. And the sun being in Virgo in the Draconic chart, this is repeating. They're both Earth, just like the Capricorn sun and the tropical. In the Draconic, the Saturn and Pluto are in Virgo, and Saturn and Pluto are in Capricorn in the tropical. And what that means is we are working on healing our relationship to the patriarchy. We're working on healing our relationship to, as a little kid, when you're growing up and you're learning the rules of what it means to be an adult. Those rules that we were taught, especially those of us who have Pluto in Libra, okay, we're getting squared. We've been being squared and also opposed, squared by Pluto and opposed by Uranus. So big shifts and changes for our generation that have to do with marriage, male and female roles, how to reinvent relationship, post-marriage divorce, and then having to like work through that side of things. Those of us who grew up with parents who were divorced, etc. So we are right now, I think, wrapping up a chapter that has to do with men and the male archetype or sort of maleness being denigrated, and that it was a bad thing to express as a male because you'd be considered, it wasn't okay to be angry, or it wasn't okay to be violent, or it wasn't okay to be to tap into those more animalistic parts of the masculine psyche because of feminism, right? So there's just been a rebound. Women have had the opportunity to go back to work, but a lot of these women have wanted to have children still, and they're trying to have their cake and eat it too, and they're seeing that it's not maybe really all that they thought it was going to be. So bringing this back to our full moon, this phase in the cycle we're in right now very much feels to me like, what's the story you've been telling yourself about relationships, about if you have children, the mother and the father role? What's the story you've been telling yourself about how you do your role as a mother or a father compared to how you saw your relationship, or how you saw your mother and father do their role, right? How they did, how they were as parents. You know, if you ever said, oh my gosh, I sound like my mom, or I sound like my dad, or what have you. That's what I'm talking about. Our relationship to these archetypal forms that aren't even real. They're abstract thought forms. You think of your mom and your dad through the lens and through the perception of a little small child as well as an adult. And so it's time to individuate away from that little child voice and grow up into the adult part of yourself, all right? So if you've been someone who's been running from that, if you've ran from because you didn't want to be like your mother or father, or whatever society said you were supposed to be, and you're trying to do your own thing, you can't escape the unconscious. It's going to come out when it needs to be processed, because all of us have wounding from our childhood, everybody across the board. If the only wounding is just you were a little kid and you didn't understand what was going on, right? And you have a story based on a little kid's mind and a little kid's understanding. That's a wound. It's something to be individuated away from. If your childhood was perfect, if you've like, my parents never fought and everything was wonderful and la la la, well, that's a heavy burden to carry into adulthood, because that's probably not the reality. It was just what your parents, it's just what you saw. So to me right now, I think in our personal relationships that are of more romantic nature, themes that are going to come up will have to do with how are you trying to either run away from that role or run away from an archetype that you saw in your same-sex parent. And by the way, this can be, when I talk about gender and sexuality, you can apply these things. We all have masculine and feminine, all of us. And some of us are more comfortable in one role or the other. Some of us are kind of in the middle, what have you. So just bear that in mind. But we all were created by a man and a woman at this point, and we all were birthed out of a woman's body. We all share that across the board. So these archetypes are foundational. They're cardinal. Aries, Cancer. Aries is the male part of you. Libra is the female part of you. Aries is the instinctive part of you, the animal part. Libra is the part of you that's learned how to behave as a human, socially, right? Cancer is the mother. It's the unconscious realm. It's the emotional realm, the womb, the dark room where we're safe and hidden. Capricorn is the outer world, where we build things to be seen, like a big building rising, All right. So these archetypes with this full moon, those themes will be coming to the surface for sort of the course of that month, December through into January. And I think it's important to note that we will then have a full moon in March, on the 19th, I think, where it's a 0 degree Libra full moon. Aries sun, of course. And then again, the next full moon is also Libra and Aries. It's 29 of Libra, 29 of Aries. So themes that have to do with relationships seriously being hammered on this year. hammered away. And I don't mean hammered on like hurt. I mean like taking a piece of metal and shaping it into something. So, and the big theme we're going to see over and over again this first 3 months is, it makes me think of the Two of Swords, okay? I have a choice to make between two options. And the one path, the one option, it's going into the woods or it's going into a place that's dark and I can't see what's in there. And I have all these mind monsters that I've created about what's in that wooded area that come from my childhood, that come from my imagination, that I'm projecting onto. That's what we do to our futures, right? I'm projecting onto this unknown territory because I've never taken that risk before. And I'm afraid of what will happen if I do, because it taps directly into my deepest fears. Maybe it's the thing I really, really want. So it's the thing that I'm kind of the most afraid of, because if you get what you really, really want, A, then what? B, also, then what if you lose that thing? Then there's no more. If that was the thing that you thought you wanted and then you lose it, then what? So there's that versus option B, or number 2, this path that is a known path and a fun path and a one that's like, it just makes me think of a party. It's like 3 of Cups, right? Like just, you know what you're getting. You know what you're getting yourself into. It's safe, but it's also exciting. So these 2 roads, most people are going to be doing this road. And it's going to be you're going to see this through relationships. You're going to see it through romantic relationships with people where they're having to choose between 2 options. One option could be amazing and everything, or could be a disaster. It's very risky in a sense, just because it's highly unknown. It's the territory that we've been afraid to move into. The other option is the fun, easy, you know what you're going to get option. And you're going to learn with this one, though, about your personal truth. It's going to be this, to me, it just feels like with Uranus moving into Taurus, lots of scar tissue related to control, being in control, power, feeling like the need to have power over other people, the need to feel like I have control over this situation. I think I have control over it, so I'm secure and safe. All of that's just getting blown out of the water this next 7 years. I mean, that's the big, I mean, financial security being shaken. We're going to have to rethink how we do transportation. We're going to be rethinking how we do our banking and just our finances. It's going to be harder for people, as it has been, just for the millennials to get into homes and loans and cars and all that good stuff. So the point is, we're rebuilding our structure. As Capricorn has been falling, the father archetypes, government, schools, you sort of think of like the rules of society. Those have been crumbling away because there have been abuses of power that have had to be addressed, right? So that's falling away, as well as the rebirth of the masculine, which I think is beautiful and I'm very excited about. And then we have over on the other side with transing Uranus and Taurus forming a nice trine. It'll be forming by sign a trine to all this Plutonian slow transformational energy regarding the male, the masculine, for both men and women. So this will be men who, I'll give you an example. Men who are like, I no longer want to get married, or I got married and it wasn't what I thought it wasn't what I thought it was going to be, and now but I'm stuck or something, and now I have issues of, like, I have a porn addiction, or I have secret closeted behaviors that I'm engaging in because I'm playing a role that's not authentic for me. You've also got women who are stepping into the male role. They're trying to do this feminist thing, right? Okay, so, and they're finding dissatisfaction. People kind of all across the board are experiencing what we maybe grew up with as being the supposed truth. Grow up, you go to college, you get your degree, and you get a good job, and you get married, and la 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 la, and everything's happy. People have been moving into that, and it hasn't been delivering. So people are having to reinvent themselves. What does it mean to be a parent? What does it mean to be a spouse, a partner, etc.? Man, a woman. So with Uranus moving through Taurus, that first, most primary earth sign that has to do with how we control our environment so we can feel safe and secure, Uranus comes along to shake things up. It's like you're building a brick wall, and then, I don't know. So you're building a brick wall, and then a car comes by and slams into it, and it breaks. It doesn't completely break like a wooden wall might, but it's damaged. And so you see there's this rigidity and stiffness with Taurus. There's this wanting to hold on, wanting to keep things like they've been, that Uranus will, even think of, actually a better example would be to think of a tornado, or to think of a rototiller. I like the rototiller in the hard, heavy spring soil that needs fresh air, it needs water and nutrients. That soil's all compacted because it's been sitting under all this snow. And it's great because maybe there's bulbs down there in the ground that have been protected from damp and from frost and whatnot, right? So there'll be beautiful flowers in the spring. But also, I'm kind of mixing my gardening metaphors, but also the soil is not as fertile as it could be. It's lacking in creativity. So I think that in our relationships, we've been looking for, and the big themes have been like the divine masculine, divine feminine. We're looking for our mirror. It's actually, we all have the divine masculine and feminine inside of ourselves. And you can't necessarily see your contrasexual parts, and you're going to project those parts of yourself on a partner. So with the full moons that we have, this Cancer Capricorn, the mother, the father theme for December, and then into March we've got the sort of lover. It's Libra and Aries, which is all about the boy and the girl, Romeo and Juliet, the fantasies, the realities, sexuality versus romance, and what is this dance? And again, it doesn't have to be just with heterosexual couples. It's across the board. What does it mean to romantically engage with another person? Is it, are we now at a time where maybe it is time for the old way of doing relationships to totally change? But how? What does that look like? What does science say about, the anthropology of sex and of relationships? That's Uranus as it moves into, it's right now, it's like about 1 or so degrees of Capricorn in the Draconic chart. That's the shaking up the foundations of the traditional way of looking at things. The tradition and conservatism and orthodoxy being, that's like an earthquake under a building that's made of just concrete, and it's going to get laid out. But there's always then that rebuilding process. Okay, all right. So bringing this back, I know I'm kind of, this is just a fun Sunday ramble. Bringing this back, I will say as well, on this full moon, we've got as far as aspects, we've got a little sextile from Uranus to the moon. And this to me just has a feel like Uranus feels exciting to me. It feels like, well, we've always done it this way before, but let's do it different this year. Like we here at our house, we usually do like all different colored lights, white lights, we just throw a bunch on our tree. This year we got purple lights, I don't know, just for fun. Maybe that kind of thing might show up for you too. This something new. There's this desire for sort of new and fun and creative change. Okay, I think as well with Uranus here in Capricorn in the Draconic chart. Uranus, of course, in our tropical charts in Aries, that 28. And just Aries and Capricorn, you put those two together and then you throw Uranus in the mix, and it's like the young son sort of getting his dad excited about trying something new, or trying something that he used to do when he was a kid. Like he used to have a motorcycle and go dirt bike riding, and hasn't done it forever. And the son is like, let's go dirt bike riding. It's kind of crazy, but they haven't done it forever. It feels very fun and kind of fresh and playful, with a sextile to the moon. And to me, this feels like coming home, old ways of doing things and old roles that people had. I sit in this chair, you sit in this chair, da, da, da. That just being all kind of changed this year for Christmas. So, and of course, I'm just talking about Christmas. There's also other holidays, but bear with me. I think as well, because we've got the moon opposite Saturn, and the moon's not at an exact opposition. It'll be at approximately 20 hours later, you'll have like an exact opposition here. And so it feels to me like emotional material kind of coming up, and does feel a little bit like that week after Christmas. I really feel like Christmas is going to be pretty, it feels like child parent themes really being underscored. I'm this way because you parented me this way, or I feel guilty about how I parented you because I should have done it this way, or I did it the way that I always said I wouldn't do it. Those kinds of themes coming up for people. If you don't have kids, then it's going to be more about you maybe looking to how your family of origin practices the holidays. So it does feel a little bit like a good Christmas to kind of snuggle up in bed and to make sure that you get in some alone time and some time to kind of process, because it does have this feel to me of being a bit of a depressed, slightly blue moon, possibly, potentially, and especially if your childhood was, I don't know, particularly difficult, or if it was really great and you're kind of feeling separated from your family, or it just feels lonely to me, a little bit lonely. So if you find some opportunities to maybe serve other people, make other people's Christmas better. If you're single, for example, do some volunteer work over for the holiday. Now, not to digress, we've also got the other thing. I had made some notes here. I was thinking this full moon feels to me in particular, it's like hoping for the impossible. It's don't look a gift horse in the mouth, right? If in a relationship, if someone's doing their best, giving you what they think you want, maybe just being okay with it and waiting for a second before making a decision either way, like stay together, break up, etc. Feels like there's going to be some pressure building and some restriction, and it's because it's going to force you to have to make that decision between these two paths that are very real. Again, especially people who have strong cardinal planetary placements, especially Pluto in Libra generation people. In particular, we are being very much kind of, hit by this, of course, where Pluto's been. So as Uranus moves out of Aries, which is a cardinal sign for the last time, it's going to be like an opera singer singing her last note. Uranus in Aries is about creating something new through chaos, right? So you have a fire on a hill where there's lots of pine trees and it destroys everything, but then it also allows those pine cones to pop open and for new seeds to come out, for a new fresh start. So as Uranus is scraping through this last little bit of Aries, or it's kind of like bouncing through, I guess, I don't know, zigzagging through, it'll move into Taurus and it's going to stay in Taurus. So you guys who have fixed signs, go in your chart, look and see actually anywhere in your chart that you've got planets at 0 to 6 degrees. Just kind of focus on 0 to 6 degrees. And notice what the relationship is to Taurus. All right? Those are going to be areas for you this year that are going to be of emphasis. It's what you're going to be focusing on. Uranus is here to teach the mind. Where do we have cognitive dissonance? Where do we tell ourselves something inside, but we behave in a different way on the outside? When I was looking at this as well, I kind of got this feeling of the things that we keep in the closet trying to almost emerge, especially like in October, November, like November time, and then them getting stuffed back in there and pushed back inside because it was just not the right time, quite simply. And so there's this little bit of karmic work that needs to be done. If you've got existing relationships in your life, if you've got even new relationships, if you have, just, I would say, evaluate your patterns in your the way you try to find emotional security for yourself. That can show up in relationships for some people. For others, it's through their reputation and through status and through feeling like you need to feel respected. It just depends on the person. So, yeah, that's, I think, going to be of utmost importance this next year is where do you go looking for security? Do you look externally, through people or through things or money or through reputation? Or do you go inside of yourself and trust your own sense of knowing, your knowingness of who it is that you are? Okay, I think the last thing I wanted to talk about on this guy was, oh yeah, there is an element here with this sort of the month of December, just this escape from our reality, just escape from reality, wanting to believe in the fairy tale and wanting to sort of pursue it and to make it happen, to make it real. And with Jupiter and Mercury forming a square to Neptune, just be really aware of, especially if you've got anything, if you've got Mercury in the middle of mutable signs, like I have this, the story is going to be constantly changing. You're going to think, oh, this is what it is, and then that changes, and then, oh, this is what it is, I guess, and then that changes. You have a really hard time putting your finger on it. So be open to learning about existential meaning, right? Like, it's okay if you don't feel like you have answers, or if things don't make sense, or if it feels like Groundhog Day. Like, wait, didn't we just do this last year? We're doing this again. This 2019 is going to be a year of a lot of changes. It's like we're rototilling the garden. It's going to be loud. It's going to be dirty. It's going to be messy. It's hard work. We're going to be sweating, etc. But it also is so wonderful once you're done with that job. I've done this before. I've done this in the South with clay, with double digging, even with like a shovel, which is a lot of work. But once you're done and you have the soil that's loamy, and it's beautiful, and it's dark, and it's like rich and fertile, and then you put your seeds in it and things grow. So relationships in your life that need to go, jobs in your life that need to go. Where are you holding on to security? And this is the last thing I'll say. Look in your chart. Where's Taurus for you? Where does Taurus fall? What's in your second house? Where do you have Ceres? Okay. Those are the areas that you're going to experience a fresh new perspective. And you may even have some flashes of insight that are, like, to a certain extent, almost like prophetic. If you've got, especially if you've got any, so like anything that has to do with Mercury or Jupiter touching those signs, okay, including third or ninth house, the third and ninth principles. If it's got to do, maybe I'll do a video. I'm going to actually do a video for you guys with Uranus. I'll talk about how it might be affecting you as it moves through Taurus. Okay, enough of my ramble. If you listen to this, then you're amazing. I need to start putting like little Easter eggs in the long rambles so that and do some contests for you guys. Okay, hope everyone's having a great weekend, and talk to you soon. Bye-bye.